Tomorrow, 115 cardinals begin the sanctified and secret process of electing the next pope.
The Catholic Church has rarely seen a moment quite like this. After years of quiet observation, careful mentorship, and deliberate positioning, Pope Francis has begun to speak more openly about a man many consider his most trusted ally within the Vatican, Cardinal Luis Tagle of the Philippines. What was once whispered in the corridors of the Apostolic Palace is now becoming part of a larger, more public conversation about the future of one of the world's oldest and most powerful institutions. The Pope's willingness to shed light on his relationship with Cardinal Tagle is not accidental. It is a signal, and those who understand the Vatican know that when the Pope signals, the entire Church pays attention. To understand why this moment matters, you have to go back to the beginning, not just of Tagle's career, but of Francis's papacy itself. When Jorge Mario Bergoglio stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica in March 2013 and introduced himself to the world as Pope Francis, he carried with him a vision that many considered radical for a church so steeped in centuries of tradition. He wanted a church that smelled like the sheep, as he famously put it. A church that got its hands dirty, that moved towards suffering rather than away from it, that chose dialogue over dogma when the two seemed to be in conflict. And almost immediately, he found in Cardinal Tagle a man who embodied precisely that vision, not as a political ally, but as a genuine reflection of the same spiritual priorities. Luis Tagle was born in 1957 in Manila, Philippines, into a world far removed from the grandeur of the Vatican. He grew up in a country where poverty was not an abstract concept discussed in theological seminars, but a daily reality visible on every street corner. His upbringing shaped him in ways that no seminary education alone could ever accomplish. He learned early that faith without action is hollow, that the Church's credibility rests not on the splendor of its cathedrals, but on whether ordinary people feel seen, heard, and loved within its embrace. These convictions never left him, and they are precisely what drew Pope Francis to him with such consistency and force. By the time Tagle became Archbishop of Manila in 2011, he had already established a reputation as a theologian of rare depth and a pastor of extraordinary warmth. The people of Manila did not simply respect him, they adored him. He rode public transportation, visited the sick in overcrowded hospitals, and sat with families in the aftermath of devastating typhoons. When Typhoon Haiyan tore through the Philippines in 2013, killing thousands and displacing millions, Tagle was not giving press conferences from a comfortable office. He was on the ground, weeping publicly with survivors, demanding faster relief efforts, and reminding the world that behind every statistic was a human being made in the image of God. That image, of a cardinal who was willing to cry, willing to be broken by the suffering of others, captured international attention and confirmed what many had already suspected. This was not an ordinary church leader. Pope Francis watched all of this with deep admiration. Their ideological alignment was striking from the very beginning of Francis's papacy, but what the Pope has gradually revealed goes deeper than mere agreement on policy positions. What Francis has disclosed, through his actions and increasingly through his words, is that he sees in Tagle something the Church desperately needs at this moment in history: authenticity. Not the performed humility of a churchman who has learned to appear approachable, but the genuine, almost aching humility of someone who has never been entirely comfortable with power and has always been more at home among the forgotten than among the powerful. This is why Francis's decision in 2019 to appoint Tagle as prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples was so significant. The position is sometimes called the Red Pope because of the enormous authority it carries over missionary activity across entire continents: Africa, Asia, Latin America, regions where the Catholic Church is not declining but actively growing. By placing Tagle in this role, Francis was not simply rewarding a loyal cardinal. He was making a theological statement about the direction of the Church. He was saying, in the clearest institutional language available to him, that the future of Catholicism does not lie in the preservation of European tradition but in the vibrancy of communities in the global South, and that the man best suited to nurture that future was a Filipino cardinal who had spent his life among the poor. What Francis has recently revealed, and what has set off a fresh wave of analysis among Vatican observers, concerns the depth of trust between these two men. The Pope has spoken about Tagle not merely as an effective administrator or a talented communicator, though he is certainly both of those things. He has described him in terms that suggest a spiritual kinship, a shared understanding of what the Church is supposed to be that transcends institutional politics and cuts to the heart of the gospel itself. Both men believe that the Church has too often allowed itself to become a fortress, protecting its own power and prestige at the expense of the very mission it was founded to pursue. Both have experienced the resistance that comes with challenging that tendency. And both have chosen, again and again, to push forward anyway. That shared experience of resistance is worth examining closely, because it tells you a great deal about why Francis has chosen this particular moment to speak more openly about his relationship with Tagle. The conservative wing of the Catholic Church has not been silent in its opposition to the direction Francis has taken. There are cardinals and bishops who believe that His emphasis on mercy, inclusion, and social justice has come at the cost of doctrinal clarity. There are powerful figures within the Vatican bureaucracy who have watched Tagle's rise with something less than enthusiasm, seeing in him a continuation of a papacy they have often found troubling. By affirming Tagle publicly, Francis is doing something strategically significant. He is attempting to shape the conversation about the Church's future before that future arrives. Because the future, in the minds of many, inevitably raises the question of succession. Pope Francis has been transparent about his own health struggles and the weight of leading an institution of more than 1 billion people through an era of unprecedented social, cultural, and technological change. While he has not named a successor, that is not how the Catholic Church works. The signals he has sent through his appointments, his public statements, and his evident trust in certain individuals have not gone unnoticed. Tagle's name appears consistently at the top of lists compiled by Vatican analysts when the question of the next pope is raised. He is young enough to lead, experienced enough to navigate the Church's complex internal politics, and globally recognized enough to carry authority on the world stage. His likely rival in any such scenario is Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State. Parolin is a skilled diplomat, a man of considerable intelligence and institutional knowledge, and a figure who commands deep respect among traditionalists who value continuity and careful governance over the kind of pastoral boldness that defines Tagle's approach. Where Tagle leads with his heart on full public display, Parolin operates with the measured precision of a trained diplomat. Where Tagle speaks to crowds in the language of mercy and belonging, Parolin works the rooms of the powerful with patience and strategic clarity. They represent genuinely different visions of what the Church should prioritize, not different faiths, but different emphases that carry enormous consequences for billions of people. The tension between these two visions is not new to the Catholic Church, but it has rarely felt as consequential as it does right now. The Church is simultaneously losing members in historically Catholic regions of Europe and North America while gaining them rapidly across Africa and Asia. It is grappling with the legacy of clerical abuse scandals that have shattered trust in many communities. It faces questions about the role of women, the nature of pastoral accompaniment for LGBTQ Catholics, and the Church's responsibility in the face of climate change and economic inequality. These are not peripheral concerns. They are the defining challenges of Catholic identity in the 21st century, and the leader who emerges from the next conclave will shape how the Church responds to all of them. Pope Francis understands this, which is why his willingness to speak about Tagle feels like something more than personal affection. It feels like a final act of mentorship from a pope who knows that his time, however long it may last, is not infinite. By affirming Tagle's vision, by highlighting the integrity of his character and the depth of his commitment to the Church's most vulnerable members, Francis is attempting to do something that no pope can do directly: influence the future. He cannot choose his successor, but he can shape the values that the Church considers most important, and he can elevate the voices that embody those values before the moment of decision arrives. What Cardinal Tagle himself makes of all this is a matter of some speculation. He is not a man who speaks easily about his own ambitions, and there is every reason to believe that his reticence on this subject is genuine rather than performed. He has said repeatedly that his deepest desire is simply to serve, and those who have watched him closely over the years tend to believe him. But service, as Tagle himself has often noted, is not passive. It demands courage, clarity of purpose, and a willingness to stand firm in the face of opposition. These are qualities he has demonstrated throughout his career, and they are qualities that will be tested severely if the Church moves in the direction that Francis has been pointing. The truth that Pope Francis has revealed about Cardinal Luis Tagle is not a scandalous truth, not a secret kept out of shame or political calculation. It is something simpler and in some ways more profound. It is the truth that in a Church often paralyzed by its own size and complexity, there are still leaders capable of genuine transformation, not because they are powerful, but because they are real. Tagle is real in the way that Francis himself has always tried to be real. Fallible, emotional, deeply human, and utterly convinced that the gospel they both serve demands more than institutional maintenance. It demands encounter. It demands presence. It demands love made visible in the messiest, most inconvenient corners of human experience. Whether that conviction will be enough to shape the Catholic Church's future remains to be seen. The forces of tradition and institutional inertia are formidable, and the next conclave will involve calculations that no public statement by any sitting pope can fully determine. But the conversation has begun, and Pope Francis has made clear whose vision he believes the Church needs most in the decades ahead. Cardinal Luis Tagle, the son of Manila who became a global voice for the forgotten, now stands at the center of that conversation, not by his own seeking, but by the testimony of a pope who has watched him closely, trusted him deeply, and chosen, at last, to tell the world what he sees.